And I'd like to, oh, nice glasses, Mary. Love those glasses. Very nice. So I'd like to introduce you
Hi, Janice.
to hi, Mary Shea. Make sure you connect with myself and Mary Shea on LinkedIn, and make sure you ask your questions here. We'd love to hear from you. So yeah, let's kind of kick this off, Mary, because we've got a lot to discuss. I'd really like to start with the metrics and the language and the changing dynamics, because we were talking about the changing political economic environment, but there's certainly many changes in corporate inclusivity in the use of language and metrics.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, everything is cyclical. Whether you're talking to your financial advisor or wealth manager, the more that you can kind of prepare for things to shift and change, and they should change and shift on the societal level and the political front, and that impacts things in the corporate world. Back in 2017, I was a founding member of Forrester Research's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council, and it was very exciting to bring that to life and start to share some of the learnings that our group was getting with the broader organization, and start to find ways to give back to different groups and different communities across where we lived and worked. And now we've got a different zeitgeist, certainly in the US, where you're on the other side of the pond. I'm on this side of the pond. There's lots of changes. Political winds are blowing differently on every different day, and it's impacting the corporate world as well.
Love that. Absolutely. Certainly impacting the corporate world. So, from the UK perspective, there's been a notable shift towards broader inclusivity metrics. And I don't know if you're seeing the same, Mary. According to the CIPD report, 62% of UK organisations are now including equity metrics in their DEI initiatives, and up to 48%, from 48% in 2020. So is this reflected in the US in terms of what their real focus is in the corporate environment?
Yeah, I would say that it's not a focus now in the US based on some of the things I just shared at the outset of the conversation. There was a big, stake in the ground, I think a few weeks ago. Maybe some of your listeners heard about this, where SHRM, the HR society that has more than 350,000 members globally, worldwide, just announced on LinkedIn that they were now focused on inclusion and diversity, and they were eliminating equity from their acronym. And it caused quite a kerfuffle over here. And on LinkedIn, I think they had, thousands of comments and many, many posts forwarded from members who were unhappy with that change. I think there were a couple of things that were mismanaged. One, they had just had a big conference and none of this was discussed at the conference. It was just rolled out. And number two, it was rolled out on Black Women's Equal Pay Day, which is sort of, I guess, insensitive would be one way to describe the timing of that, Janice. So, yeah, I think it's become, equity has become a little bit of a word that now we're not allowed to say in a corporate setting here in America, or it's discouraged. And I'm finding that to be quite disappointing and sad.
That's really interesting, because in the UK, there's more of a shift towards equity rather than diversity.
Right.
So I think that is quite fascinating. And, there's kind of, it's negative, it's lose-lose, whatever you do. Unless you include those three acronyms, you're never going to get a parity, which is what we're trying to achieve. But actually, you can't achieve equity without diversity. It's just not possible. You can't achieve inclusion without diversity and equity. The three are intrinsically linked. So I think it's interesting the way they go. Why do you think there's a move away or a separation? It's divide and rule again, isn't it? Why do you think there's a real separation, segregation, even a loaded word, of these three key elements?
Well, it's interesting. I think there's probably a lot of reasons, and I don't want to overly wade into a political conversation, but I do think it does have to do with the political dynamics in the world that we're seeing broadly, shifts to different types of governing systems that are not democracy. And we've got a bifurcation of values here in the United States. When you have an up market back in, 2021, and post some of the challenges that we had socially here in the US, we were all talking about it and really focused on building diverse and equitable teams and looking at pay equity and consciously trying to hire and bring diverse candidates into the mix, and hire teams and boards and executive teams that were representative not just of the world around us, but representative of our customer base. And that was a huge focus. I also think during some of that time, you found that some of the ways that government would lead had dissipated. So CEOs were taking on more of a leadership role in trying to bring voice to trying to use their platform to bring some of these topics to bear, where we weren't seeing the equity across the board. Now we're in a very different environment. It's a down market. The political winds are shifting and changing on a weekly basis here in the US. You've got the advancement of generative AI moving very quickly. The ways we work, engage, interact, and play as a result of some of the technological advances are changing. And we're seeing big shifts at companies that are doing well, even where they're reducing the force broadly, significantly, and investing heavily in areas that support Gen AI types of initiatives. We're starting to think about different ways of working. And so, I don't know, it's a different moment, Janice. And so I don't have the answers.
No. Let me give you my take on this from a UK perspective, and moving away from diversity and why it's almost dangerous, right? And moving towards equity instead, not both. In an equitable world, we talk about fair treatment and access of opportunity for all, which is great, which is exactly what we want. But when you decide that you're not going to include diversity, it's rather like, we know in sales, coming back to the area that we work in, it's easier to make and it's not a great term, a B player salesperson into an A player. They've already got access, they're almost there, than anyone else. If you have someone that has already had privilege and access, to lift them up a little bit more takes a lot less energy than actually looking at the whole diverse environment that hasn't had access, hasn't had opportunity, and lifting them up to be your A players. It takes a lot more work. So what happens when you focus only on equity? That, humans, we're pretty lazy. We're going to look at who already has the privilege and access and lift them up a little bit more, make it a little bit more fairer. But actually, you're not equalizing the whole society imbalance and years of historic undermining and removing or creating barriers for people so they have a lack of opportunity when you don't include diversity into the mix. So it almost becomes, for the people at the top, there's an equalization, and everyone else, the other 80%, well, you're just left behind. And that's why I think it's almost dangerous not to include diversity when we're talking about creating opportunities for all.
Yeah, I think it is, but I think we are where we are right now, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. But I do see, and I talk to a lot of different business leaders, and there are companies out there that are doing great things and interesting things, who are building internship programs. So starting to find diverse candidates before they even get out of college. And I think that's a great way to start to infuse your company with um, new talent, and not sort of defaulting to just looking at referrals of folks that come from your internal employees. So there's a lot of interesting things that are going on. I think technology can also, and Gen AI gets a negative rap sometimes for creating bias, but it also can help eliminate bias. And the company that I work for, Higher Quotient, we have a recruiting tool. It's called Easy Source, and we can actually source candidates, diverse candidates for our clients. Our clients can actually do that, and that doesn't mean we're going to miss out on majority types of candidates, but we can also ensure that we're looking at a wide range of candidates that make sense. I also think that sales is a great equalizer. If you can get into sales, you can make quite a bit of money, and it does create economic equity, right? Which is really wonderful. And I think in the future we're also going to see less of a focus in sales on people who have gone through college and have multiple degrees, but we'll see people who have really simply learned the skills. They're tech savvy. They've gone to a couple of different boot camps. They've done a couple of trainings with my friend Justin Michael or what have you, and then they're selling and can make a ton of money. So I think there's lots of really good things percolating, and I want to make sure we don't miss that.
Absolutely, absolutely, and thank you, Daniel Jacob. Mary, he's left a comment. I don't know if you're interested in picking this up. He says companies want to make money, and capitalism will buy the best people at the lowest price. Now, I think Higher Quotient has something to say about this, a positive way of actually doing that and making sure they truly are the best person.
Yeah, I think certainly in sales, you're not necessarily looking for the cheapest salesperson, because the most expensive ones are typically the ones that go to club and can really change the trajectory of your business. So while I agree capitalism is about making money, I think sales, if I'm former CEO, I'm very happy to sign off on a commission check for someone who's going to make more money and have a bigger W-2 than me. That's what we want to see. So not always looking for the cheapest person at the best person at the cheapest price. And I think the question is, how do you define the best person, and where is that pool that you look for the best people from? In our software, Easy Source, we're actually pulling from a pool of active and passive candidates across a range of different public and proprietary sites, databases. And instead of just simply going to LinkedIn, we can scan websites, association sites, Crunchbase, LinkedIn, Monster, Indeed, GitHub, and so on and so forth. And so we're looking at a really wide swath of candidates from a range of different sources. So I guess for Daniel, I'd say, let's think about where you get the best of the best, and trying to think about how you can widen your pool and get the best possible sellers that you can.
Yeah, I certainly love High Quotient for the fact that it selects from a much wider pool than you'd normally be accessible across the globe, because we
Right.
often recycle what we already have in our own environment, and that's like, just we're not getting that much better, or it's a little bit better than
Yeah.
what we have before. Well, this opens up the whole globe to you, and the resource that I use will help you to benchmark the best in your industry. Great. I'm glad you like that reply,
Thanks,
Daniel.
Daniel.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your comments as well. So the resource that I use would then take what Higher Quotient does, and then also benchmark what is the best for your industry, your market, so that you really know by guarantee that you're going to get the best client. And in that way, Daniel, and everyone else listening to this, you're reducing your cost of hire and you're increasing the opportunity of getting someone that will stay longer term and achieve your business objectives.
I think Daniel reminds me of, we're going to keep talking, Daniel, about your question because it was such a good one, but reminds me that we're in a different world in terms of sales and sales hiring, Janice. And we talked about this in our last get together, our last chat, which is CROs and heads of sales now are going to have to do much more with much less because boards and CEOs understand the power of generative AI and automation to have much more efficient workforces, right? So I think the onus and the pressure is on business leaders to, number one, get the very best talent right out of the gate, because you can't hire 3 salespeople and expect one to succeed. You've got to hire one, and you've got to make sure that person is the best candidate you could possibly get. And then to Janice's point, you need to arm that salesperson with the very best innovative technology so they can operate efficiently and effectively. And then you need to develop personalized development and training programs so that you can retain and keep them. You lose a salesperson, that can set you back $1 million depending on the type of business you run. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And Anpo, who we know very well.
Yes, it's great to see you.
The cost of acquisition recruitment is extremely high. And Daniel again has, so I absolutely love comments from our audience. We know that we're talking about the right subject that has a lot of interest here. Now, I think, Mary, I'm going to write an article. I've got lots of great examples of companies, what they've done in terms of their language, intersectionality. The Workday surveyed 2,600 business leaders and what they had to say. Workday is another great example of a company that's doing great work. So, you know, I'll probably get you, include you on this as well.
Please come back to me on that.
As you say, we want to come away with we want to deal with the issues. There are issues, let's not, you know, but actually, you know, there are lots of great companies that deserve a shout out for the great work that they're doing. So, and we've got
so many great companies that are really leaning into some of these items. And, you know, we have some very effective communicators here on the political front, and I work with one, I won't mention his name, but he distills things down to their simplest element. And that's why I love this politician and civil servant. It's about having a company that reflects your customers, so that your customers see themselves in your organization and have diversity of thought, experiences, and perspectives. And then it's about diverse teams outperform those that don't. So 1, you need to reflect your customers, and 2, you want to deliver the best possible performance that you can. And it comes down to those 2 things for me, and it's not complicated, right? And so I think there are many companies out there doing really exciting things, and I'd love to give you the names of those companies for your article.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, so we can make this UK, US, and, you know, many organizations now are global, but it's quite interesting. Often the company may be global, but their practice may not be. So we need to shout out on both sides, companies that are doing really well. McKinsey's State of Organization Report 2023 said that 70% of their respondents says that organizations that express transformative DEI aspirations, so only 70% of respondents, so that they have transformative aspirations, and 47% say that they have infrastructure, they have the infrastructure to realize the DEI initiative. So talk to me a little bit about some of the infrastructure that's really important to achieve the objectives of DEI.
Yeah, and you and I've had this conversation before, but it does start at the top, right? So, it really starts with the board and the board dynamics there. And you and I've had the conversation where, if you have one woman on the board, she may not be as effective as if you have two or three, right? Because you've got to have more voices. So it starts with the board and the executive team and looking at companies that are committed to having organizations that outperform their competitors and that reflect their customers. So I start there. Um, then I think it's about having a wonderful HR practice where there are employee resource groups and groups for different types of uh, affinities, people who have affinities to get together in a community forum in a safe space and to be able to give back to the community at large. I think those kinds of things are wonderful from an infrastructure standpoint. And then it's about having access to the best technology that can help you execute and realize what your corporate values are, right? And having access to tech that can dramatically streamline your recruiting process, create a much wider pool of passive and active candidates, and allow you to gain access to top tier talent that is diverse is a great way to start. So those are three things that I think can help organizations with the infrastructure to continue to move this initiative forward.
I love your point on having a workforce that reflects your customer. And we've talked about this a lot in that you've got to have a sales force that reflects your buyers, and where it has fallen over, there's great examples where that companies have lost big contracts because it hasn't been reflective. But also from an innovation point of view, by having a diverse sales team workforce across the entire organization, then certainly innovation creativity increases, and that can only be good not only for you as an organization, but certainly for your customer, thinking of what's coming next in the future. The more innovative and creative you are and able to deal with those issues, then it creates the competitive advantage that we're all looking for.
Absolutely, absolutely, and we're at a transformative juncture where everything is in flux, Janice, and you and I have been talking about this quite a bit. So yeah.
Yeah. I would kind of add, perhaps organizations need to go deeper on identity. I think often organizations think they know how they identify as an organization, but actually don't ask the workforce. They don't
Mm,
ask their customers. They have a view, and they may even have a statement of their view. But
right.
actually, as you say, Mary, so much has changed, not in the last 5 years, but in the last 2 years, that makeup and that view of who they are, what is their positioning as an organization, may have changed vastly. So there used to be systematically organizations that did a review of their culture.
Yeah.
And I think that perhaps has been lost from the pandemic, that we're not doing so much of those 360 assess. The organizations are not in the office anymore. There's going to be real
Mm,
structural reasons why
yeah.
that's not happening. But I think by losing that, they're also losing an opportunity to, from the ground up, really rethink about what their organization's position is and how they can go forward and include everyone in the workforce and get a view of everyone in the workforce.
I completely agree with you, and I think when you're in a contracted economic market, there's a couple things happen, right? And we've had some, especially in SaaS, which is where I play and have played for the last several years. I mean, it's been 3 pretty tough years. COVID was a high point, and now we're still, facing pretty dramatic headwinds. And when you're facing economic challenges, when you're facing big churn in your business, what do leaders do? Well, they immediately go back to what's familiar, what brought them here, instead of what's going to get them to the next tranche. And so I think that means there's a couple of things. One is, I go go back to the way I ran my business 20 years ago or 15 years ago, because I was successful then. And then the other thing is there's less economics for some of the softer things, like the cultural aspects that you discussed, Janice. So less pulse surveys, less things of that nature, less focus on DEI and so on, because quite frankly, businesses, many of them are fighting for their lives still, and others are trying to get back their valuations that they've lost. And so some of these softer things are the first things that go, and I think they're the last things that should go naturally. But, I don't get to be the decider of everything.
What a shame to that. The world will be
well, what can you do?
Mary. And thank you, Daniel, again for your comment. He agrees 100% of companies should be prepared to reassess and adapt strategies based on feedback and outcomes, learning from any failures to improve future initiatives. Well, completely 100% agree with that. Great one, Daniel. I appreciate your comments. And so, we need to kind of like wrap up. So while you're thinking about what's the kind of one thing you would like this audience to take forward, Mary, I would just like to say, I'm definitely putting together this article because I have so many companies and examples, but we've only got a limited amount of time, so I really do want to put out that positive note, and I'll get Mary to include her examples in this as well. So look out for that. But like this, there's a recognition that still more needs to be done. 52% of this is from the Workday report, and I'll put the link in. 52% believe that the current leadership, so it goes to your point about it starts at the top, Mary, your current leadership makeup of their organization has a negative impact on DEI. And therefore it has a negative impact on business results, because we know the link between the two.
Yeah.
So what would be the one thing you would like this audience to take forward, Mary?
I guess it's really kind of two things that come together as one. In difficult times, I tend to focus on the micro instead of the macro, because I can't, we were talking before, there's lots of things going on in the world that may or may not, some are great, some are not so great. And some of the things that are not so great are almost so big, it's hard to imagine how you can impact transformational change. So focus on the micro, focus on your world, and activate your platform for some of the things that we're talking about. So impact people who are in your sphere. And, publish, write, say things. If you see something, say something, and continue to put yourself out there to be a voice for positive and transformational change, and a voice for having more diverse, equitable, and inclusive workforces and environments. And I think you'll find it really rewarding, because then it doesn't get so overwhelming.
Thank you, Daniel. He said, well done, Mary and Janice.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Daniel. It's great. I was literally going to say, if there's any other topics, this is the last for the kind of summer break, but if there's any other topics, anything you'd like us to revisit, to delve into deeper, please do contact me, and I will make sure I get either Mary or other guests to answer your questions. And it's fantastic. Thank you so much for your comments. I think Mary summed it up really well, so I won't say anything more. But thank you, Mary, for being a guest on the series of 3. I would ask the audience to go back and make sure you listen to more of Mary's insights and experience in the